We are once again stoked to welcome onto the pod InsideNU Editor-in-Chief Yanyan Lee. Yanyan, for anyone in the Northwestern universe who isn't already familiar with her work, I would say that you can and should claim to be the foremost stick sport expert at America's foremost stick sport university. Yanyan's sitting right at the epicenter of this just unreal field hockey, lacrosse, softball, golf run that we are on right now. She knows this universe as well as anyone. For most of you who listen, she walked us through the NU lacrosse preview last spring. Now we're sending up the bat signal again so she can walk us through this Northwestern field hockey upcoming season. Yanyan, thank you so much for jumping on the pod with us.
And thank you for inviting me onto the pod again. Very excited to talk about field hockey, and I'm very honored to be called the foremost person or whatever in the Northwestern stick sport world. We have plenty of great writers that cover both sports, but definitely very appreciative of the title.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, again, it's we're all fortunate to be here for this unreal run that includes national titles spread across just about every one of these sports, three Big Ten softball titles as well. But yeah, I mean, we've been reading all of your stuff, pretty much relative to lacrosse, relative to field hockey, relative to everyone. Everyone else should be doing the same thing at InsideNU. Speaking of which, before we kind of get into the field hockey preview for this Titanic 2025 field hockey season, we kind of wanted to start with like a little bit of an editorial logistics question because I mean, I know that over at InsideNU, you guys are all dealing with this run up to the Northwestern football season that includes the arrival of Preston Stone, year number 2 on the lake, the new stadium coming, NFL potential first round draft pick and Anto Saka, et cetera, et cetera. But unlike every other university's journalists, you're also managing the fact that NU is entering the fall, bringing back one of the most star studded teams in the nation across any sport in this field hockey team to chase a second national title, third national title in 5 years potentially. How are you all managing this unique kind of challenge rolling into the fall from a coverage standpoint?
I mean, I don't think it's a challenge more so than it is an opportunity. I know that sounds kind of corny, but I think that's just more coverage opportunities, especially in-person coverage opportunities for our writers, because obviously with football, we're covering every game in person, but maybe for the other sports, like you obviously like that's just not, we don't always do that, especially with like live coverage. But field hockey, because field hockey's making all these deep postseason runs, like you've got the Big Ten championship, the NCAA tournament, maybe some big Big Ten regular season title deciding regular season games. Like there's just more opportunities to cover games live and extensively because this team is so good. So you don't just have football. And obviously, other sports, if they're good as well, they'll get that same type of live coverage. But yeah, with field hockey, there's just a more additional opportunity. So that's how I view it.
Yeah, I think I again, like from what we've been seeing online, the coverage that you're putting up online. I mean, it even extends to preseason. I mean, we're looking and seeing like even individual player previews, etc. Under the field hockey umbrella, written by like multiple writers. So that makes total sense. It's like it's it's that many more exciting opportunities. I would imagine too that probably for some of the younger, especially for the younger generations. I mean, like our generation's been wedded to football forever, but for so many, like I have to think the opportunity to cover field hockey or lacrosse, et cetera, has got to be a big draw for a lot of your writers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the reason why I started writing for InsideNU. It was after following the lacrosse team this spring before I got here. That was their title run in 2023. But you make a good point because actually we're coming out with like a sort of answering all your questions about the field hockey season like a few days before the season starts next week, where we have a bunch of writers answer like general questions about the season. And I texted in our InsideNU group me yesterday, like, hey, like this message if you wanna like help out. And like I didn't, there were so many people, like there were way more people than I expected that liked that message. And like people that I didn't think were like super interested in field hockey, but like they like that message, and it shows that they're like enthusiastic about covering the team, and that's just yeah, let about younger writers and the next generation being excited to cover a sport that maybe they didn't follow their entire life, but they get the opportunity to do so at Northwestern because the team is just so good. Like, yeah, definitely very cool to see.
the it's you're so right, and it reflects everything that we've said about lacrosse, I think, for even longer than we've said it for field hockey, where it's like not only are you seeing that increased interest, but you're kind of at the vanguard of the teams in the entire nation that are driving that increase. I think obviously we all saw it with Northwestern lacrosse, where you can look at the giant profile and be like, Northwestern lacrosse is responsible really for increasing the profile of lacrosse in the entire middle of this country. And now you're seeing it with field hockey too. And this is, I kind of like pivoting to as we kind of get into this field hockey preview. And this is the thing that you can, so many undergrads, right, like lining up to cover this team, everyone getting so excited about it being the thing that pulled you in, to write for InsideNU. For all of our listeners who focus less on the stick sports or focus more on football and basketball, etc., we always feel like we need to start by reminding you, relative to field hockey, just like lacrosse, the talent level we're talking about here is the highest of the high. This is Ohio State football or Georgia football level talent on the field hockey field. These are the very best players, either on the field or waiting to get on the field or coming in through the portal. I think one of the ways we were talking about it, framing it, is like, you can think of it this way: Northwestern is viewed as having one of the most stacked field hockey rosters in the country, and we just graduated two first team All Americans. And I think we were thinking maybe we can use that to pivot into a position by position preview of this team by starting with one of those two players and starting between the posts. So in goal, Northwestern is replacing one of the best to ever do it, not just at Northwestern, but anywhere in NCAA field hockey. How are the Wildcats planning to do that?
Yeah, and that actually brings me to a player that personally I'm the most excited one of the players I'm most excited to watch this season, and that's Juliana Boone, who's expected to be the starter in goal at Northwestern. She's a sophomore, but she didn't play at all last year, so she's gonna be coming in just like without any experience. But she actually played for the same club as Annabelle Scubish, Texas Pride, both of them from that area, and she also has experience with the U18 national team. Field Hockey Analyst, which is a social media page that covers a lot of college field hockey, international field hockey. They recently did a D1 watch list of players to watch on every team, and for Northwestern, Juliana Boone was one of the five players on that watch list, along with Olivia Bencole, Ashley Sessa, Maddie Zimmer, Ilsa Trump, who are arguably the four best returning players. And obviously, I think it's unfair to Boone or to anyone to put her in the conversation with those four and sort of like have those expectations immediately coming out of the gate. But the fact that she's even like part grouped together with them sort of shows like what people see in her and the potential that she has. And obviously, it's going to be very hard to replace someone like Annabelle Scabish, who for so long was one of Northwestern's best players, arguably the best goalie in the country. But I also think there's something very refreshing about seeing a inexperienced player who has a lot of that potential grow into herself with more experience and get better and better. And I think that's what we're going to see from her this season if she does start, which I think she will.
That's fascinating. I was unaware not only of the Olympic pedigree, which really they both have. They've both played with for the national team, but also coming out of this same like Texas pipeline is fascinating. And clearly, like, this is someone who clearly, like, the as you were saying, like, the publications are speaking of someone with this, like, the expectations being this sky high. I mean, in terms of, like you said, the names that they're putting her alongside, it kind of makes you feel like, well, but for the fact that the best goalkeeper in the nation was starting ahead of you, you very likely be starting, which is a pretty incredible level of depth to have right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So definitely one of as I said before, one of the players that I'm most excited to watch. Just like so honestly, just like solely that novelty factor. Just because the goalie is such an individualized position, and you have someone who's like entirely new being thrown in after 5 years of the same, obviously very great player.
Yeah, that kind of turnover. Speaking of fascinating situations, I think we were looking at this defense and thinking this defense is a fascinating position group in that kind of like what you were just talking about. There are these really interesting questions in terms of who's going to come in, who's going to play, who of the young guns are going to play and play how often. And then yet in the middle of it all, we have, despite the massive star power that we'll get to in a little bit, this position group in the middle of all of this kind of flux, you have arguably the single biggest stable factor on the team, like the rock of this team, quite possibly, and Ilsa Trump.
For sure, for sure. Led the Big Ten and led Northwestern in minutes last season. Ilsa Trump had was good as a freshman, but got even better as a sophomore. Second team All-American. Obviously, she had that defensive save in the national semifinals against UMass, which could have saved Northwestern season. Cy Trivedi, who's one of InsideNU's managing editors, you guys should also check his work out. He did a player preview on Ilsa Trump, and I think he said something along the lines of that defensive save really truly established her as this defensive threat slash powerhouse, even though she's been great for her first 2 years, but that signature play really like took her status to the next level, and I think we're gonna see that in her junior year.
This is so for anyone who's not who did for whatever reason didn't watch last year in the national semifinal against UMass in a tie game in the third quarter. She basically dove towards a ball that had gotten past Skubish and was just it was headed into goal and dove for it and literally saved it off the line. It's one of those things where the effort was incredible, and if it's not executed perfectly, she hits the ball into her own net. And yeah, I think for everyone were you at that game?
Yeah, I was in Ann Arbor for the tournament. I was doing double duty, the field hockey Final Four and then football in between. So
That
very, very interesting combination.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I mean, like the atmosphere when she saved that must have been just unreal. The but I mean, it was. But like you said, and like you said in that article, it's right. I mean, it's you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as this is a player in Trump who's played a titanic amount of minutes, and also you can point to, as you can with players we are going to get to, you can point to a specific moment and be like, this person is going to be there for you no matter what. So outside of Trump and this central stable figure here with all of these minutes logged, it seems like there's so much else going on in this position group. Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think obviously the two biggest losses are going to be Lauren Hunter and Katie Jones. Both of them played over 1,000 minutes for Northwestern, but a lot of returning talent. I'm basically gonna do like a shortened summary of what I had written in my field hockey roster preview that I wrote a few weeks ago for Inside. But I think the biggest intrigue for me is the return of Maya Zavoinovich because she, for those of you who don't know, played with Trump growing up, both of them lifelong friends, but very different, equally as highly touted coming in, but very different trajectories because Maya, she started her freshman season, but then tore her ACL midway through. And then her sophomore year in 2023, she had this insane start. She was NFHCA National Player of the Week. Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, had 9 goals in 12 games, but then she tore her ACL twice. And to suffer the same injury and one of the worst injuries you can have twice, like that's gonna take a toll on you. And in 2024, she played pretty limited minutes, but I think this season she's expected to be fully healthy. And so I think if she can show and continue the potential that she showed in early 2023 and bring that to the defensive line, I think that could be huge. So she's definitely someone that I'm very curious to watch in 2025. Greta Hinke is another one. She was second team All Big Ten. I just remember, even if you don't really see it because she's not going to be the primary player scoring all the goals. Like I just felt like she made a lot of really big intangible plays during that Virginia game, the quarterfinals, which was very close. So she's someone to watch. Um, Carrie McCormick, who is a transfer coming from Old Dominion. She was a 2 year starter and helped Old Dominion to the 2023 NCAA tournament. So that's a notable newcomer. So those are just a few of the names in the backfield that I'm looking forward to watching.
I think one of the things we should mention relative to what you were saying earlier is they were friends growing up in the Netherlands. And this is I mention this because for anyone who's not a field hockey expert, this is something that we've all learned as we've all learned more about field hockey. The Netherlands is a massive power location for this sport. And we've pulled a lot of top players in for this from this sport. The other thing, and it's interesting that you mentioned, and I hate to put these kind of I hate to throw names around like this, but anyone who's familiar with Northwestern's spring stick sport knows that there's a pretty notable player who missed an entire season with injury and then really came back with a vengeance. right, right after that. I hate to lump Izzy Skane level expectations onto anybody. That's not fair to do. It's just to say you can bounce back and you can bounce back in the most major way possible. And then it's funny too. You mentioned it's McCormick, right?
Yeah.
This is the first of I think we're fascinated by this when we talk about because I think everyone who follows football, like the transfer portal is so big now, and you also know that this is the first year that Northwestern really in a heavy level has pulled it in, and we've pulled in really quality transfers at really an unprecedented level for that sport. When field hockey's pulling in transfers, it's like they were likely, if they're from a conference that's smaller than the Big Ten, they were likely in conversation for best player in that conference. And this is like I feel like something that is a theme that's going to be continuing, but it's like someone from I'm not sure what conference Old Dominion is, but we're talking about a player who right, like helped lead them to one of their first tournament appearances ever.
Not their first tournament opinions. I think Old Dominion actually has a bunch of titles from the 20th century.
Oh, there
But
you go.
yeah,
No,
yeah, but
or what was it
he
there that she had led them to their first? Is it just then like a bunch of years? Is that what it was? Or
just their 2023 tournament appearance.
oh, gotcha. Okay, so that's what that makes more sense. Yeah, this is the thing.
Yeah.
This is that onboarding thing. It's like Old Dominion is probably a powerhouse program, but we're all like learning
Yeah.
about this sport in
Yeah.
leaps and bounds right now.
Yeah. Well, their last title was in 2000, but they have one, two, three, four. Yeah, they have nine titles. So second most behind UNC, but before 2023 they hadn't made a tournament in 10 years.
Gotcha. Well, as someone who spent a solid hour today talking with a bunch of other gentlemen about Northwestern's 2000 Big Ten football championship, far be it for me to besmirch any 2000 era title. Uh, they all they all count exactly the same. In any case, on to the midfield. So right off the top, talking about the midfield, the Westlaw Pirates, want to start with a big tip of the hat to departing NU legend Lauren Wattis. I think most of you probably know this is a friend of the pod. We love Lauren. We had her on last year to preview what ended up being this incredible 2024 season. We are really hoping to see her wearing the red, white, and blue in the future. But speaking of the red, white, and blue, it it's we it's always useful. I think in any position group or on any team, it's always helpful to be returning the National Player of the Year.
For sure, for sure. And you told me before the podcast that you wanted to talk a little bit more about Maddie Zimmer, and I will give you that because I just finished writing a player preview of talking about her in particular. And honestly, like, she has a very, very strong case. I don't even think there's a case. I think it's just like clear to be the best player in Northwestern field hockey history. I mean, National Player of the Year, first Northwestern player to ever win National Player of the Year, first Northwestern player since 1994 to win the Honda Award, Olympian, was the most outstanding player of the 2021 and 2024 titles. And obviously, both both teams were stacked, but the fact that she was the main, like the biggest factor behind the Northwestern's two national titles, like that is that is some massive, massive weight. Like honestly, like to me, I don't think she gets this in as much recognition as these other two. But we talked about Izzy Skane. I think that Maddie Zimmer should be in the same conversation as players like Boo Buie and Izzy Skane, as Northwestern athletes who have defined the 2020s this decade. Like she should be up there with them. She's just as accomplished, if not maybe more accomplished than those two. Like, we can talk more about her game later, but I just wanted to say that first.
Sure. I would tack two things onto that from my perspective, and the first, and I think it's one that you mentioned in your piece, is that you can also kind of look at it from the perspective of in a season where Maddie Zimmer wasn't there because she was with the red, white, and blue. She was prepping for the Olympics. You know, the argument can easily be made, and this is not a trying to negatively frame anything. It's just Northwestern was within a whisker of a third national title, and they didn't have Maddie Zimmer on that team. And I think that's the impact of a player who's that much. And the only reason she wasn't there is because she was representing her country and preparing for the Olympics. And then the second thing, and this is where I think the Boo Buie comparison is spot on, is there are all the accolades and all the numbers and the two titles and the Olympics and everything else. But Northwestern fans can also point to these individual moments. And I think taking us back to that UMass game, it's
Yeah.
it's the entire setup. There's a goal where the name of the player on that goal is a player we haven't got to yet, who is an equally phenomenal player. But the entire setup to the goal that took Northwestern to the national title game was that unreal moment of individual brilliance from Maddie Zimmer. And it's like, if you watch that highlight, it's like that sums up everything that player is right there.
Yes, exactly. And not just that game, but the Michigan game in the regular season overtime. Lauren Wada's game-winning goal, but it was Maddie Zimmer who brought that ball from the midfield, went past three defenders, passed it to Ashley Sessa. She misses the shot. Shot gets rebound. Lauren Wada scores. So another goal where it was Maddie Zimmer who was doing a lot of the heavy lifting with getting that ball to the offense. And I think that brings me to my point about sort of her role as a midfielder and just how her ability to play connector, like just between the defense and the offense, and to cover like that span of the field and to do it at that speed with that amount of ball control and maneuvering through defenders is like honestly incredible. And to back that up to with her alongside her best offensive season ever. She had 10 goals, 12 assists as a midfielder, ranked second at Northwestern, is an incredible scorer, 2 goals in the title game. To have that offensive ability alongside her natural midfield abilities, just like so versatile, someone who can just be that X factor for her team. And this year, she's gonna be the oldest player. She's gonna have another thing I mentioned in my articles. She's gonna have this really unique role of sixth year, oldest player on the team, only player to play for both of Northwestern's championship teams because she's really seen this program go from the bottom up and she's gonna have that insight because I feel like a lot of the other players, all the other players, they're only used to this Northwestern program at its peak of going to the title game every year and expecting a title. But when Maddie Zimmer committed to Northwestern, that was not the case. So I think I'm not trying to say that the rest of the team will be complacent because they won't. That's just not something that's instilled in their mindset. But I think Maddie Zimmer can definitely serve as like a reminder or to give that perspective about just like how far Northwestern has come. And I think that's going to be important in this season.
Well, also the lead pipe lock to your greatest player ever case is she still has an entire other season to play.
Exactly. Exactly.
The numbers are only going to extend off into the distance. So yeah, an unreal player to have at midfield. Midfield though, and again, this is to give no short shrift to everything we've talked about so far because we've covered. I mean, from goalie onward, that these are players that field hockey publications and that the whole nation. These are all players that have been circled by everybody. This is the level of talent on this team. But with that said, this now, like having just talked about Zimmer, this is where the sheer volume of talent on this team just starts to become staggering. I think looking at the rest of this midfield, there are just veteran stars. There are all these unbelievable young guns. There are big transfers. There's everything. Just walk us through the rest of this unit.
Yeah, and just on talking about recent success of some of Northwestern's midfielders, Laura Salamanca comes to mind as a player who I think only started one game last season, but was the only freshman to appear in all games last season. She's coming off a bronze medal with Chile at the Junior Pan American Games. So someone with who's coming back to Northwestern with that international experience under her belt. And I think it goes unnoticed how much of a benefit that international experience is, especially even if it's on the junior level, because it's something that not to bring it back to lacrosse again, but when I interviewed Maddie Taylor and when I interviewed Boston College's Lydia Colasante for another publication. Both of them played for that U20 US lacrosse team in 2024, and both of them talked about how much it's going to benefit their confidence, how much it benefited their confidence, and I think we could see that with Salamanca as well. And then the newcomer in the midfield, or another transfer, is Kate Jansen, who played for Delaware her freshman season, was on the CAA all-rookie team, helped Delaware to a CAA championship title and NCAA tournament appearance. She's coming to from Newark to Evanston, so another player to watch. And then Lindsey Brown, Julia Soriano, two of Northwestern's four incoming freshmen. Both of them have experience playing for junior national teams like U18, U21. Um, so those are players to watch. Ella Kokinis as well, someone who didn't really only started two games, but also appeared in all 24 games, could step up and get more minutes this season, scored one goal. So just at the top of my head, those were some of the names that in the midfield I think I'm looking forward to seeing on the pitch.
One of the
Sorry, that
things
was a lot.
No, absolutely. I think you mentioned one of the things that comes up again and again is this international team experience. And with all due respect to the greatest lacrosse team of all time forever, the Northwestern Wildcat lacrosse team, those international lacrosse teams for the US are beating the brakes off of everyone that they play. Field field hockey is not like that. It goes back to what we were talking about before. In Europe and in South America, there are these massive power bases of this sport where it is just women's field hockey is just at this ultra elite level. And the US is trying to reach that level, right? And the sport is very much growing in the US. And again, Northwestern's right at the vanguard of that. But like all of this, like all of these US all these Northwestern players who are playing for all these different U.S. teams. It would be like being like the U.S. men's national team soccer team. Like you're playing up every time you put on the red, white, and blue. And I just have to think that that value and that level of experience is just massive for all of these players. And speaking of players who have that major Team USA experience, moving to the attack, moving to forward. The biggest thing I'll say here is this: on the backs of everything you said about Maddie Zimmer having the 100% rightful claim to being the best Northwestern field hockey player ever, you know how in the NFL, if you look at this past 2024 season, Josh Allen was the MVP. But thank goodness they had an Offensive Player of the Year award so that Saquon Barkley could win the Offensive Player of the Year award. Thank goodness the Big Ten also has both of those awards because it is staggering that Ashley Sessa put up those numbers last year and didn't win MVP. And the actual MVP is on our team. It's Maddie Zimmer, and she deserved that award. Everything Sessa did last year was just job dropping to us, and we're just wondering how she can possibly follow that unreal season up.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Zimmer and Sessa, I feel like something that I always say is like this whole point about like who's going to be MVP is kind of moot because I think these two players like when they have that connection together on the field and they have that not just at Northwestern but with years of playing at like the US national team, they played in the Olympics together, like that connection between the two of them, especially when it's like Zimmer coming down from the midfield to assist Sessa, and you saw that in the semifinals. That's just unstoppable. But more about Sessa specifically, as you said, numbers are insane. 24 goals, 19 assists, led her team in both categories, which is quite frankly insane. Broke Chelsea Armstrong's Northwestern single season's point record from over a decade ago, led the nation in points. Just someone who just is able to carry a massive load, single-handedly carry a massive load on a albeit very talented offense. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most about Sessa is just how skilled of an one-on-one attacker slash forward she is because like I mean you made a post about this morning about her goal against Iowa and like that's just a fraction of the stuff that you see her the goals that you see her score. Like for those of you who haven't watched it, you totally should check out that video on Westlot Pirates' X account of she just takes the ball, takes it and like starts dribbling it in midair and
I
shoots it into the goal
so
without it touching the
I was
ground.
I was so to continue the Saquon Barkley parallel. That parallel really works because each of them made a play last year where I think the reaction was, I didn't know you could do that. Like I didn't like I think especially for a lot of us are being onboarded into field hockey, the reaction was, I didn't know that was a thing that a person could do on the field hockey field.
I will say though, I did like a few months after the season, I did out of curiosity like go watch like a highlight video of the Olympic gold medal match between Argentina and China from Paris, and I saw people like doing that. They're called 3D shots. Like I was like, oh, so people are just doing that all the time. We just don't see it at the college level, but that goes to
Doing
show
it
like
all the time at the top Olympic level. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but it's not just that. Like so many of her goals stick out to me from last season. Like the goal she scored against Harvard, where she was running at full speed and sh roofs the ball at to the top of the net at a 90-degree angle. There against Ohio State, she like basically like shot the ball as she was sliding towards the goal. Like just stuff like that. Like you will see it and think like, wow, like did she just do that? Like is this real? Like that's the kind of player that Ashley Sessa is. Not just someone who can score in volume, but will do it in the most entertaining way possible.
Well, speaking of most entertaining way and circling back to something that you mentioned when you talk early when you brought up Sessa about like shouldering this much load. One thing that I think we've been very conscious of relative to Ashley Sessa, and this goes to again, I think you talking about the way the sport has changed, even since Zimmer came in, like with respect to Northwestern. But even as the sport is growing at Northwestern, field hockey is one of these sports, like the same as you saw lacrosse a few years ago, where the sport is just growing by leaps and bounds within this. And it's been very clear to us since Ashley Sessa first arrived at Northwestern. You can go back and look at her as a high school player. You can look at her in the Olympics. This is someone who has been viewed as someone who is growing this sport. This is someone you can just tell. And I remember going to the Duke game last year. And after Duke, you're talking about this absolutely star-laden unit of Northwestern where everyone's a star on this team. And they've just put it on the number 5 team in the country, Duke. And there were all these young girls waiting. And you could see that they were waiting for autographs from all of the players, but they were really waiting for autographs from Sessa. And Sessa came out, and just the way that she handled it with it, just like star power is the easiest way to explain it. But this is someone who that won't be her last Olympics. The accolades are only going to increase from her. And as incredible of a player as she is on the field, you can just see from the way she conducts herself on the field, off the field, like this is someone who knows that growing the game is on her shoulders, and she carries it.
Yeah, I agree that star power from Sessa is just so obvious from the first day that she stepped onto Lakeside Field. And I think the game where she really established herself was that Iowa game. I wrote a feature about Ashley Sessa last November where I said that game against Iowa where she had that goal where she took the ball up into the air, didn't let it touch the ground, dribbled it 3 times, and put it behind the back of the net. That game where she had 2 goals against Northwestern's biggest rival, one of Northwestern's biggest rivals in field hockey, really established her as a Northwestern star. Like, she's always been a star, but that game established her as a Northwestern athlete star. And I think you can see it with how she, like you talked about, like her star power off the field, but also the way that she scores her goals is just incredible. Like, not just the Iowa game, but she scored a goal against Harvard where she was running at full speed and then roofed it to the top of the net at a 90-degree angle. She had a goal against Ohio State where she shot it while she slid into the goalkeeper, and just stuff like that. Like, just anytime she touches the ball, it's some outworldly play, and you could definitely see that star power from the way that she plays. Like, she is someone who will not only score, but score in a way that's entertaining.
For sure. And I think, like, knock wood, the way this timetable will roll is the end of her Northwestern career will roll right into another Olympics, and her star will just continue to rise and rise. Of course, just like in the midfield, this team is just ludicrously stacked up front, with names fans know, massive players stepping up. Take us through the rest of this attack.
I mean, for starters, you can't talk about the Northwestern attack without talking about Olivia Benkohl, who also, like Sessa, has 2 years of eligibility left and is someone that I don't think has reached her full potential yet. She was a number 1 recruit out of high school, came in freshman year, was All-American. Her numbers took a slight dip in 2024, but I think that was more so a product of being on a team with so many other offensive stars than it had to do with her gameplay, because she was still ranked 4th on her team in total points, had 8 goals, scored in the national title game, and I think she's a player with a lot of potential, and I think she's going to get better and better, and someone who is one of the other stars on the team, despite not having the same amount of national accolades as a Maddie Zimmer or Ashley Sessa. And I think the biggest impact transfer coming to Northwestern is Grace Scholes, who's from Princeton, was a 2-time All-Ivy League honoree, second on points for Princeton, which was an NCAA tournament team. Northwestern only beat the Tigers by 1 goal last season, so she's coming from a team that's similar in caliber to Northwestern. And Tracy Fuchs talked about how she was going to be sort of like a setup person for more scoring-oriented attackers like Olivia Benkohl or Ashley Sessa. So I think those are the two main other attackers that I think will have an impact alongside Ashley Sessa, but I also see some other players stepping up as well, like a Piper Bors, who played 20 games last year but only started in one. She had 5 goals and 3 assists, so someone who could see a bit more playing time as well. But just overall across the board, like with the midfield and the defense, a lot of different options on this overall super stacked team.
It is. It's incredible. It's insane. I'm guilty of not talking about Coach Tracy Fuchs enough yet. I mean, this is also like one of the legendary coaches, new Hall of Famer, 2-time national champion, Olympics, U.S. Olympic team coach, and then just it's wild that despite all of this talent we've talked about, and just this team has a couple transcendent players, and then like one of like the most eagerly anticipated goalkeepers in the country, and former number 1 recruit in her class, and OBC, and Ilse Trump, and on and on and on. All of this talent, all of this coaching, and somehow, despite all of this, I think that the feeling is still that Northwestern's path back to another national title is going to be a tough path. I mean, as we record right now, the AFHCA preseason poll has not come out yet. It's possible, though, that when it does, Northwestern's not in the number 1 spot. I think I would wager the Cats will be number 1, but it's possible they won't be. Who are the biggest challenges to a repeat title and a third title in the 5 years going to come from? Like both biggest challenges in the Big Ten, biggest challenges nationally.
So the NFHCA poll did come out earlier this week, and as expected, Northwestern is number 1, receiving all of the first place votes. And the number 2 team behind the Wildcats is North Carolina, which I think will be the biggest threat for Northwestern. You can't bet against the most successful program in college field hockey history, and the only team that has beaten Northwestern at the NCAA tournament since 2020. And the Tar Heels, it can be easy to sort of think about them and be reminded of that upset loss to St. Joseph's last year, which was a very weird game where North Carolina outshot St. Joe's by a significant margin, but the St. Joe's goalkeeper and just played the game of her life, and St. Joe's just capitalized on its opportunities better. But North Carolina, it's easy to forget that leading up into that NCAA semifinals game, the Tar Heels were the number 1 team in the country, steamrolled their way to the Final Four, and just, I think, still has the talent to win a national championship because they return arguably 3 of their best players, who are some of the best players in the country. Riley Heck was the 2023 Honda Award winner. Charlie Bruder was the nation's leader in goal scoring. Both of them were first-team All-Americans last year. And then CSK Bruning, who first-team preseason All-ACC selection and second-team All-American. So I think you can never count out Aaron Matson and North Carolina out as a threat and sort of like that 1A, 1B with Northwestern in the 2020s. And I think that rivalry is going to stay. But some other teams that I think will be a threat to Northwestern in the polls, Virginia's at number 3, Maryland's at number 4, and even before the polls came out, I thought that both of these teams did pose a threat to Northwestern, with Virginia almost unseated Northwestern in that NCAA quarterfinals game last year where they were up after the first half and took Northwestern to overtime. They come in returning some of their best players, like Suze Leemans, who is a preseason All-ACC selection, and also they have the number 1 recruiting class in the nation and number 2 in the nation in terms of recruiting incoming freshmen is actually Maryland, which goes to your question about biggest threats in the Big Ten, and I think that's going to be the Terrapins for Northwestern this year. And Maryland has always been a tricky opponent for the Wildcats. There was that overtime game in the Big Ten tournament finals in 2023, Northwestern beat Maryland by 1 goal on the road in 2024, and I think that's always going to be a difficult matchup. And Maryland's another team that returns a really young but really talented, returns a lot of production from last season, including Alyssa Kalibasco, who was the starting goalie for Team USA at the Junior Pan American Games, and helped that team take silver. But I think the Terrapins, that matchup with Northwestern will probably be one of the more critical ones in the regular season.
Speaking of the Big Ten, we were looking at Northwestern's schedule, and again, I guess because we have these two stick sport titans in the fall and the spring in field hockey and lacrosse right now, it's so easy to find yourself comparing and contrasting between the two. And I think you look at some of these recent lacrosse schedules and they're just so front loaded. I mean, they're loaded all the way through, but they just seem to be really front loaded. This field hockey schedule strikes me as more back loaded. I mean, you have that Duke game right off the top, which is a huge one, but it just seems like the stretch run in conference play on this schedule looks just like really imposing. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the layout of this team's schedule.
I mean, if there's one thing that the lacrosse team does that I wish that the field hockey team could do as well, I don't know who decides that, but I know lacrosse, they always have those big gauntlet matchups with the best teams in the country every year. Northwestern has always played teams like BC and UNC in lacrosse every year, but we don't get that gauntlet matchup against UNC in field hockey. And just selfishly, I wish I could see that more than a potential Final Four matchup, because I think that has the potential. It already is, but it has the potential to be an even greater rivalry with that regular season showing. And I think it would just be fun to see Erin Matson and her North Carolina squad come to Lakeside Field. But overall, I still think Northwestern has a strong schedule. Aside from that, both in conference and non-conference, but I do agree with you that this schedule is very back heavy, because I think that stretch of the season where Northwestern plays Maryland on October 19th, Michigan on October 24th, and Ohio State on October 26th. That is the most important stretch of the season for Northwestern, and I honestly think that stretch will be what determines who wins the Big Ten conference regular season conference title, because Maryland, Michigan, and Ohio State, I think, aside from Northwestern, are the top three teams in the Big Ten, and I think Northwestern playing those matchups, those matchups are going to be really important. But the one positive about this is that Northwestern only has 5 home games this season, but Michigan and Ohio State are 2 of them. So 2 of Northwestern's hardest matchups, and both of them happen to be the rare home games that Northwestern's gonna get. So I think that is a positive, but agree with you overall that this schedule is very back heavy for Northwestern across the board. That Duke game, I will say, is very important, like you said, not just because Duke is a good team, preseason ranked number 5 in the country, but also that game is going to be played in Durham, which is the site of the Final Four this season. That the Duke game and the game against Boston College, which is ranked number 8 in the country, so Northwestern will be able to get some good practice at that venue, which I think is important.
Also, too, I think you can, if you step back and you can kind of extrapolate. I'm trying to mentally access the football schedule right now, but as we know, all of a sudden you're going to blink and the Lakeside Field era for the fall sports is going to be coming to a close. And I mean, again, like none of us know exactly what the future for that Lakeside facility is going to be, but those 2 late October, that Maryland and that Michigan game, anyone who's the football stadium doubles as a much improved vantage point to watch the field hockey team play. And I think both of those, October 19th and October 24th, or sorry, I should say October 24th and October 26th, maybe 2 of the last opportunities to get to do that. I guess we'll see, but those are ones to definitely circle on your calendar, circling late October for some field hockey, with the ability to watch it from that awesome vantage point. So with all of this said, looking at the schedule, looking at the rest of the national landscape, looking at everything we talked about with this unreal team, what's your outlook here? Like what do you think? I mean, obviously we're coming off this magical run here. But at the same time, like you mentioned, there just in the ACC alone, there is this massive collection of power, and a lot of it sounds like it's power that's on the way up, and UNC's right at the head of that. And then there's a couple of really tough teams in the Big Ten too. What's your outlook for the Cats here? Like, how do you see this thing going?
I mean, I think overall the expectation will be for Northwestern to repeat because it returns a good amount of its top talent and all that. But I do think it's going to be a lot harder to do it the second time than it was to do it the first, just because as much as teams like to say, oh, we're not defending our title, we're attacking the next one, it's always going to be hard to play with a target on your back as the defending champions. It's also hard to defeat the same team twice or three times. A lot of these teams are teams that Northwestern played in previous years, and I think just being able to deal with the pressure of being the favorites in every single game and having that defending champion weight on your shoulders, I think that will be a big hurdle to overcome. And obviously Tracy Fuchs out of anyone knows how to handle that, but I think that will be something to keep an eye out for Northwestern. I'm not saying that they are unable to live and succeed with that pressure. They've made the national title game 4 years in a row, but it's just something to look out for. But overall, I think it's fair to expect what we got from this team last year to happen again.
I feel like we've said this many times across multiple sports, also, particularly in the stick sports, but especially with it not having happened last season, it really feels like North Carolina and Northwestern are destined to dance here. I whether if it comes in the tourney and when it comes in the tourney, like I'm like you, I I wish we could get to see it, as a tune up for both of these teams early on in this season, but I kind of feel like hopefully Destiny will give us that matchup down the road. But I agree with you. It's like the target on your back. I think in that situation, kind of what makes me feel a little bit better is again, like saying goodbye to great friend of the pod, Lauren Wattis. I think of someone whose career was defined by unreal moments. You mentioned Virginia looking ahead to this coming season in the ACC. And it's like for us, Virginia and Lauren Wattis will always be synonymous because she scored that goal to send us to the Final Four. But with that said, I think again that a team can be losing a Wattis and losing an Annabelle Skubish and still have, and I feel like we've talked about it a couple of times, but not just so much talent coming back, but players who just are defined by these magical moments, right? And it's like all the ones we mentioned, like Tromp's save, Sessa's goal against Iowa, but then that Zimmer run to that Sessa goal against UMass. And it's just like, these are players who have all done the biggest things on the biggest stages. And I think combining that with Coach Fuchs, like, to your point, right? Like we're headed into the gauntlet with a big old target on our back, but I kind of feel like with this group, anything is possible here.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned before, I'm not betting against Tracy Fuchs. I'm just thinking about like that 2023 lacrosse run where Northwestern won the championship and then the next year returned most of its major players, but you could sort of see the impact of losing a player like Haley Radigan or Elle Hansen on that 2024 team. And I think it's part of the reason why 2024 for Northwestern wasn't as successful as 23, despite having most of the important players. And I feel like you can maybe anticipate the same thing happening with field hockey with the loss of Wattis and Skubish. But on the other hand, I think field hockey and lacrosse are just consistently great programs that I think that sustain success and going back to back also wouldn't surprise me.
Well, knockwood, they can overcome it. Knockwood, we get a third title. Yeah, knockwood, we get a third title in 5 years. Knockwood, we get two in a row. And to your point, Maddie Zimmer puts her absolute stamp on this unparalleled field hockey career. Yanyan Lee, thank you so much for walking us through all of this. Again, I know you spread it around the glory and to everyone else at InsideNU, and deservedly so. We consider you to be the expert of experts. I'm sure anyone who's listening feels the exact same way having listened to this. Tell our listeners where they can go to get your coverage on this team and what they can read as we get closer to the start of this season.
Yeah, so all my coverage and the coverage from so many other great writers at InsideNU can be found on InsideNU.com, the website, as well as our accounts on X, social media, not social media, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and Facebook. And we'll have coverage of all the Northwestern sports. Right now, there's a lot of football content up on our site, but we're looking to get an overall answering your questions about field hockey, Northwestern field hockey type of article out soon. I don't know if it's going to be published by the time that this podcast drops, but stay tuned for that and for more detailed field hockey coverage. I think one of our goals this year is to go beyond those sort of game recaps, especially earlier on in the season, definitely going more in depth. So that and all Northwestern sports coverage, again, can be found at InsideNU.com.
Fantastic. Yanyan Lee, Editor-in-Chief, InsideNU, thank you so much for taking us through this upcoming field hockey season.
And thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to seeing this when it gets published, and I look forward to following the season.